What is up, Thrive fam? CJ Finley here again with another episode of the Thrive on Life podcast. And today we're going to be shooting the shit with my wife, as she said before we jumped on the podcast. I was asking her, what should we talk about here today? And she's like, let's just shoot the shit. So we're 39 weeks
it's such
into
a non-Erin
pregnancy.
Thing to say.
Yeah, but you said it. That's how we're opening it up. And yeah, 39 weeks pregnant, going into the last week. And we kind of want to do a really good job of documenting our journey throughout this process. And first and foremost, congratulating Erin for everything that she's done up until this point in pregnancy, especially when it comes to the health and fitness side of your life. So I think a lot of today's discussion is going to be around from the moment you found out you were pregnant until now, kind of how have you thought about health and fitness and what you've been doing to prepare yourself for the day of giving birth, and then what you're preparing to do after you give birth. So is there anything you want to say before we just shoot the shit and get right into it?
Let's get into it.
Okay, cool. So we found out you were pregnant because of your Whoop watch. Both Erin and I wear a Whoop, and it tells you your sleep stats and your HRV and how you're recovering. And in early August, Erin was not recovering well, and she has a very high HRV and typically has really good sleep. It's funny because I'll sleep longer, but her sleep stats are better, even though I'm technically in bed longer than she is most days. And this particular week, you were in the red for probably 4 or 5 days in a row, and you were attributing it to stress and work. And we had a visitor in town, one of our best friends, Jeff, and yeah, it was 100-degree days, and you were still working out, and you thought that you were sick. So you went and got blood work, and I'll let you take the story from here. But I just wanted to set the stage of like, that's how we found out you were pregnant, was you thought you were actually run down.
Yeah. So for anyone that has a Whoop or is into tracking metrics like that, I know it's not for everyone, but I'm really grateful that I was already tracking beforehand, because it's been really cool. Just before I get into the exact week of finding out from that, like this whole journey and being able to document how these metrics have changed through the different weeks and through different trimesters has been really cool for me to see and visualize. Maybe it's the engineer in me that likes to visualize how the pumping of the heart changes as the body grows, but super cool, and learning a lot about that. And there's really not a lot of research out there on pregnant women and how these biometrics are affected by pregnancy. So a lot of the data that they're collecting is new and being used in research. So super cool. But back to that week. So you're right. I was working really long. I remember preparing for staff meetings where we were having a bunch of people from our Latin America team come in and North America. So a bunch of executives were coming in, and I was preparing for a week-long set of meetings. And lots of long hours, lots of late work dinners. And like you said, I was at that point doing a lot of physical activity outside in the heat too, keeping up with my training. And I was just attributing the low recoveries to that, and just being exhausted, being like a little bit more stressed because of the work situation going on. And I figured, all right, I'll just give my body a break from the running. So I remember that week, after like 2 days in the red, because it's pretty rare for me to be in the red, pregnancy aside.
What is the red?
The red, oh yeah. So for anyone who doesn't have a Whoop, red is a recovery, basically a span
there's
of
green,
your recovery.
red, and yellow.
Yeah.
Green means that you have scored, I believe, a 69 or 70% or higher on your recovery.
Yeah.
And what goes into recovery is a few different things. It's how much strain you had versus the amount of sleep you had versus how high your HRV is. So if you want to look this stuff up, you can look it up at whoop.com. But just to give you a general baseline, there's green, red, and yellow. And typically on your green days, it's like giving you the green light to just push it. On your yellow days, it's like, watch out. Maybe you're a little bit stressed and you're coming down with something, or you really pushed it the day before. And then red is like, okay, maybe you should do some recovery today.
Yeah, so it's kind of a score that indicates your readiness to perform that day. And if you're in the red, the general guidance is, pull back, maybe don't do that long run, swap it for something a little bit more low impact, or a walk, or just relax and give yourself a rest. So that's what I did. And 4 or 5 days later, still getting red recoveries and just was not feeling well. Not from like a sick, like I'm going to throw up standpoint, but just knew that something was off. And as someone that's pretty proactive and in tune with my body, I was like, I just need to get checked out. I'm going to go get my blood work done. I think I know which tests I need to order. And so I did that. And thankfully here in Texas, there's a bunch of, we go to any lab test now. So if you're in Texas and you ever want to get a panel of blood work done, you can go in there and pick from a whole menu of different tests that test different biomarkers, and you can get it back. You can have a doctor interpret the results. But I knew which tests I wanted to order, so I did. And
Which was what?
I ordered the Women's Health Comprehensive Panel, which is a full panel of all of your hormones, essentially. And I ordered the Heart Health Test, which tracks several like inflammation markers, but also indications of any kind of stress that could potentially be on your heart. So it's also like a cholesterol panel. I think I got one more. What was it? It might have just been like a general blood test. And you get your results back pretty quickly. One of them I got back the next day. And I'm walking along the lake. And I think you were out somewhere. Okay, you were out
it's a Saturday.
Squatch at the gym on Saturday morning. And I'm on the lake by myself. And I see an email come through. I'm just kind of like leisurely walking. Checked my email as I'm walking. And I see, okay, you got your results back. So I'm like, all right, I'll check it. And as I checked it, this is the hormone health test, I saw all of the ranges like completely out of normal range. And on this particular panel, it'll show you the range and it'll indicate like you're either in a certain phase of your menstrual cycle or you're in first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, or post-pregnancy, I guess was the other. And it was all indicating first trimester. So immediately in my mind, I was like in shock.
But we need to backtrack here. So you actually had a symptom that I knew.
Yeah. So CJ is the type that will claim that he knows.
No.
He knows that
I knew that when you're
potentially
having
was pregnant.
heartburn, that is a sign. An acid reflux is a sign of being pregnant.
Yeah, I didn't know it was heartburn, but during the week of meetings, I did feel like a little bit of tension in my chest. And for anyone that has been following me, you know my father had passed away of a massive heart attack, and he was in like great shape and health and otherwise. And so anytime I feel any kind of off with my heart, I'm a little precautious. And so I did feel tightening in my chest. Looking back, it was probably heartburn. And that's what prompted me to get the heart health test. I was also doing a lot more long distance running and an increased strain on my system. So I thought it would be good to just check things anyway. And so, yeah, we got the results back, saw that all the hormonal levels were in first trimester range. And I thought, okay, well, I'm either pregnant right now or I need to go to the doctor immediately and make sure something's not wrong with my liver or something else hormonally. So call CJ, let him know. He's like, all right, taking a test when we go home. And we did that. And needless to say, 2 different pregnancy tests came back positive. And we were in a moment of just like, wow, this is happening. You know, like for us, we've mentioned it on the podcast before, it wasn't really intentional at this time. We were at a point in our lives where we felt like we were ready if it were to happen. And so we're very grateful that we're here. But yeah, it was a surprise to us. And especially considering I thought something else was wrong. So for me, it was actually, I was thankful that that's what it was. And it wasn't something more serious health-wise. So from that moment on, I'll go into how I adapted everything. It took me a couple of days to mentally process. And then,
yeah, I don't think you changed much in that first month. You didn't really have to change that much. But yeah, run us through like, okay, so you find out that you're pregnant and like, what are some of the first steps? Because a lot of the things that you've been doing throughout this process, you've been picking up along the way because we have never been pregnant before. So we don't know what to do. So what is
one of the
like
first
the first
things
steps?
I did was being as into fitness as I am, I felt like there was a lot I didn't know. Because again, I wasn't planning to get pregnant at this exact point in time. So I didn't feel super prepared. in that realm of things on how I should adapt. So I decided I was going to get certified in pre and postnatal fitness and started learning about all the changes that your body goes through and how you should adapt through the different trimesters. So I initially didn't change much. I would say I probably scaled back a little bit of the intense running in the heat, and, extreme physical fitness from a like functional standpoint, kind of scaled back. But I was able to pretty much keep up with activity.
Yeah, I would say you didn't lessen in the first trimester. You didn't lessen your duration, and you didn't lessen the actual moves and what you were doing. You just lessened the intensity.
I will say I started to do a little bit more low impact. So I started going to bar classes, which is something that, I used to be a bar instructor. So I go through phases of that kind of exercise. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to stop running as much, I'm going to replace that with some classes that I enjoy that I know will be good for me. So I started doing that. But you're right. I didn't really.
Well, where did you get your
Pull back.
certification from?
It's an online, I don't know what it stands for, but it's AFPA.
Yeah, so you got certified, but like run through most people, their immediate reaction to being pregnant isn't like, I'm going to get certified, I'm going to learn something new. But for you, you wanted to protect yourself from doing any harm through that workouts that you were doing. So you get certified. What did you do? Did you go on Google? Like, what were you researching to land on that certification, and why that particular?
Yeah. I mean, I chose, there's a couple different ones out there. I chose one that seemed to be from an accredited source and looked at, the reviews and what kind of content you learn, what kind of resources you get, and was really looking for something that at the end of the course, I feel confident that not only would I have the tools for myself to get through this pregnancy and adapt in ways that I should be, but also to be able to coach others through it and design workout programming for other new or expecting moms, or even through the recovery period. So something that encompassed that as well. So postpartum and how you heal the core, get back to fitness, because that's important to me to understand and also be able to help women with. So
what were your takeaways from it?
The takeaways are that there's a lot that changes. I think the biggest takeaway is that there's a lot of myths out there around how women should not work out during their pregnancy and not do certain things. But there's really not a lot you can't do. You just have to be a lot more mindful of the impact it could have on your body from a stress standpoint, and obviously protecting the baby. There's moves you don't want to do, but from a workout standpoint in general, like, you should be able to stay active the whole way. And that I do attribute to how good I felt this whole time. I think a lot of it has to do with how active I've been committed to being.
What were some of the signs that you saw in that first trimester with your Whoop scores and stats?
Definitely my heart rate variability plummeted. My resting heart rate increased by about 20 beats per minute. So for perspective, prior to pregnancy, my resting heart rate was in like the low 40s. And
No.
Yeah, it was.
No, it was
45.
not.
It was like
No.
45.
It was like 48, 49. I could literally pull your stats up. I'm gonna call BS on that one.
Okay.
I know it was like 48, 49, because you're right around where I am at 50.
Okay.
And then you raised to like, if we're gonna talk about this stuff, it has to be legit. Your heartbeat raised to like
make a difference. It's in the 40s.
The mid 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
but like
and
20,
even-
because 20 is a lot. Like you raise like 10 to 15 beats per minute.
Well, the last time I was at the doctor, they said my heart rate was 76, and that's
Yes, because that's not your resting heart rate. When they were checking your heart rate and you're moving around, that's not your true resting heart
Okay.
rate. Your resting heart rate when you sleep versus when you're moving around is going to be much different.
right. So there's a lot of variables, but for perspective, my resting heart rate, we'll say, was in the 40 to 50 range, and it shot up about 15 to 20 beats per minute through pregnancy. And heart rate variability was in the mid hundreds. Heart rate variability is a measure of the variability within, well, we can
Go look that up if you're listening to this.
Yeah, I won't, I'll save you from that definition, but that's the measure of how ready your body is to perform. And so
It's basically a resiliency metric. That's
Yeah.
what it is. It's tracking how
resilience to stress. And so it was in like the mid hundreds, and through pregnancy, it dropped to at the lowest, probably like the 40s.
Yeah, but you've been averaging. So for anybody
70.
listening, like pregnancy has turned on protective mode in me and just like really dialing into her stats and making sure everything's okay. And so I've been watching like literally every day her stats. But I would say 70s. 70s has been like the relative range for most of your pregnancy, which is still good for most for a lot of people out there. But the 70s was your general, I would say, foundation. And then now that we're later in pregnancy, it's increasing, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the natural inclination is that when you get pregnant, your stats are going to be impacted. So your heart rate is going to go up and your HRV is going to go down, which makes sense because you're going to be using a lot of resources in your body to produce a human being. So
And your blood supply has to increase. You're
What-
pumping pressure at a faster rate. Yeah, what were we going to say?
what were some of the mental things that you were going through when you first got pregnant?
I'd say actually mentally, it's been an interesting switch. As I've reflected on the time period in general, the whole journey, I think I've done a lot better of a job at managing stress and anxiety. So I've actually felt a lot calmer through this. And mentally, I think that's an interesting, I wouldn't have expected that if I were to guess, how I would be impacted. I would think it would cause more overwhelm and stress. But I think it's brought an interesting perspective to life where I've just been able to compartmentalize certain things in a different way and manage life a little
Okay,
better.
go into detail, go into depth. I'm trying to
I don't
get you
know
to like,
what more detail you
okay,
want.
why?
I don't
okay,
know.
you cut out coffee, so that's going to reduce
That
anxiety.
that could be one hypothesis.
Yeah,
That
so
the cutting of
Tell
caffeine.
some stories here.
I cut out caffeine. CJ wants me to share. I'd say the
How much caffeine were you drinking prior to pregnancy versus after?
I was probably having, I don't know,
Too much.
multiple cups of coffee a day, at least 3. And like 1 to 2 in the morning, and then 1 to 2 in the afternoon. So yeah, it's probably too much. And
So if you're listening to this, I'm trying, like, we're on this podcast, and the podcast is to be as valuable as possible to you. So one of the things that we have to spotlight is what life was like prior, and then what life was like during, and then what life is going to be after.
Sure.
And that's going to be the most valuable for people. So Erin is an extreme go-getter. And when you're a go-getter, certain times and certain things that you utilize to maintain that aren't necessarily always the best. And the thing is, like, when we're thinking about like the worst things, like having an extra cup of coffee a day is not the worst thing that you could be doing in
what's
life.
interesting about it is that even despite the amount of coffee I was drinking, I really didn't think it had an effect on me. I was like, yeah, like I'm just numb to caffeine. Like I'm immune to it. So
See, now we're getting somewhere.
yeah.
I think
So-
a lot of people fall underneath
I
that.
didn't think it impacted my sleep. I thought the afternoon coffee was just something that I enjoyed, really. And I didn't really attribute it to an extra edge. In the morning, yeah, I definitely felt
And
like
also-
I needed it for a little bit of stimulation to get me going in the morning. But the afternoon, I was kind of just like, this is an enjoyable drink.
And you just cut it cold turkey, right? Right when you're
Cut it
pregnant.
cold turkey. Actually, my body rejected it. I was like, the smell of it, I just did not have an interest, which I was really shocked by because that
When
was
did
a
you get that back
staple.
though? Because you did start picking up decaf.
Yeah, and I think the decaf, I still get a little bit turned away by the taste and smell, despite having decaf. But it's something about the routine and like ritual of coffee that I enjoy. So I guess mid second trimester, I was like trying to introduce it again in decaf form for that purpose, but have not had caffeine this whole
I'd be
time.
interested after you give birth if we switch up the type of caffeine that you have, what you would feel because you haven't had it. And then two, because for me, like I don't drink coffee because of the way the the caffeine from the coffee makes me feel and the acid of the coffee versus like other types of caffeine. I would say it does give me an edge, especially with like having to train and then use my brain and turn that switch on and off a lot. Because when you're doing intense training and then you try to like go and sit down at your laptop and turn the brain power on, sometimes you need a little bit of fuel and a little bit of gas, and the caffeine does help.
You're not like a tea drinker, so tell them what your caffeine intake typically is.
Yeah. So in the morning, I always drink this drink called Focus Aid. It's by a company called Life Aid. And the reason that I stumbled upon this is I had the founder here on my podcast way back when, I believe in 2020. And they offered me to like try some of their products. And I tried this one product called Focus Aid. And it essentially is caffeine from yerba mate and then like some nootropics and then B vitamins. And I realized like in the morning, this like makes me go from zero to like lit up and I feel great. And it doesn't have any side effects like the
Have
coffee.
you ever tried to not have it and see what happens?
Yeah, I feel the difference. Like if I don't have it, I don't feel as lit up,
Alert.
as charged. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like I'm of the believer it's like we live one time here on this earth. So if you can find some things that are going to bring more enjoyment to your life and there's no science that it's going to kill me drastically quicker, then go for it. Coffee was not a good feeling for me, so I didn't do it. And then I would say in the afternoon, I'm a big trial guy. I trial different products. So we were at Central Market the other night and I picked out 3 new products that I haven't tried before. One's a matcha, one's like another type of yerba mate, and then this like plant-based drink, caffeine drink.
What got you to pick those 3 up? Was it the branding?
Usually it's branding, and then I just make sure that there's like no sucralose. Anything that I'm going to drink consistently can't have certain ingredients in it. So things that are like going to preservatives, sucralose. I don't really mind sugar as long as it's real sugar, because I burn so much energy. I'm just burning that sugar off anyway. So that's really what I look for, and that's kind of how I operate. I mean, most days it's just 1 a.m, and then on heavy training days and days where I'm going for a pretty long time, and I just don't drink any caffeine after 3 p.m. So like that's kind of my rule. But it's been interesting to watch you because mentally that's the biggest change that I've seen with you. Like, how many times have I just been like, you're glowing, like you're just like your energy is just calm and amazing. And not to say that you didn't have amazing energy before, but like being around you all the time.
How would you describe how I was before?
I would say you're on your negative side is neuroticism. Like that, my negative side is aggression and I don't know what the word is for it because I'm not like aggressive in a way where I'm going to hurt somebody. Irritable, I would say, like aggressive and irritable. That's mine. You don't really get irritable even when you're super tired. You're pretty calm, cool, and collected. But neuroticism of like, this needs to be here, that needs to be there. Why didn't you do this? And why didn't this happen in a certain way? I would say that I believe prior to pregnancy, you're just how you went about life, and caffeine intensified that. And I think that does that for a lot of people. Like it intensifies whatever that, in a good way, it'll intensify things. And then on a negative, like if you're tired and you're drinking caffeine, like it's going to intensify both arenas, the negative and the positive, and just being aware of that. And
I'm also curious though, sure, coffee might be a factor in this, but how much of it has to do with the hormone changes?
Yeah,
so I'm really, like, one of the things that I'm thinking about is mentally preparing for a very different experience postpartum where all of those hormones are going to plummet naturally. And I need to make sure I set myself up to handle that and not let it get the best of me and get those bad traits.
And that's
going.
that's the beauty of having the sauna and ice here at our house. So one of the tests that we're going to be doing once she gives birth is, I think, a natural habit for a lot of women out there is, and men, when you're feeling depleted, is to search for something to put in your body, just like we were talking about the caffeine. And I don't think necessarily when you go through trauma, that's the best way to handle things. And I'm very excited for once you go through this experience to then be able to sit in a sauna and sit in an ice bath and sit in front of the red light and do some things that are natural healing modalities that isn't really putting something in your body to stimulate you in any which way. So we'll be documenting that, but I'd love to not get too far off track here and jump into the second trimester and what you were experienced there, and then how you were kind of like programming your life during that. Because then once you're in the second semester, you start thinking about like second semester.
It's kind of a semester.
Yeah, it's like a semester. Second trimester. Some schools did have trimesters, didn't they?
I don't know.
They did. But second trimester of pregnancy, you're starting to think like, okay, now we're like 3 to 6 months out, and like the next phase, I'm actually going to have to slow down and start changing things with work and things like that. So what was going through your mind, and how are you programming your life in that middle part?
Second trimester was busy. From a work standpoint, I was doing a lot of corporate travel, and I felt like I was resilient to that. I felt like I could keep going. And I think right around the holidays, which is when I hit around 6 months pregnancy, I started to feel like, okay, it's time for me to slow down in that capacity and cool the travel a little bit, make sure I'm home and resting a little bit more. Because even though travel can be manageable, you're still not in your own bed. You're not doing your own routine. You're eating out a lot. And it's just, it takes a toll on you in ways that you may not realize until after the fact. So I was able to manage, but I definitely acknowledged that that was something that I had to scale back in the months ahead. So second trimester, it was busy from a work standpoint. Fitness wise, I kept up what I was doing. I didn't change much. I still focused a lot.
Ran a half marathon.
On strength. I did run a half marathon, which was a highlight. But I will say that running took a back seat, and my priority was really around maintaining strength. So this is the first time I've actually
not just maintaining strength, but what you started integrating more lifting in.
Yeah, if you want to call it lifting. I think...
I would.
Okay. Well, I take that as a pass from you because you're Mr. Fitness. But
Trav is going to laugh if he hears that. He calls me Mr. Fitness in our texts all the time.
Well, yeah. So this is interesting because prior to pregnancy, I would describe my fitness routine as being very diverse. I always wanted to keep running because I like to feel like I was maintaining my endurance and running.
Well, you love running.
And I enjoy it. I would say I wasn't a strict lifter. I'll put that in quotes.
No, I'm going to give you some shit here.
And the reason why?
She didn't want to lift most times.
I would say it's primarily like when I would think about lifting, I think that for me, the hesitation was a lot around like you have to focus on different body parts and you have to have certain days dedicated. You have to, I'm putting in quotes, because I think there's a way to incorporate lifting and resistance training in your life that doesn't have to be as structured as it may come off as being. But it was just boring to me. So I gravitated towards...
You fall in line with you used to fall in line with the mindset that if you lifted heavy, you were going to get big.
I'd say I used to fall in line with that. And that's like years ago. But I think there's been a lot of knowledge out there now that shows that that's not the case.
Yeah, but I wanted to preface that because there's a lot of women that still think that. And then on my flip side, because I'm not just going to point the finger, I'm going to say I didn't run because I thought that would inhibit muscle growth and strength. And it's actually having a running routine is I'm stronger now and more fit, and I can endure more in all arenas of fitness because I integrated that in. So I just wanted to speak to that point because what you believe has a big, or not you as in Erin here, what you believe if you're listening to this has is a big factor in what you actually achieve in life and what you can accomplish. And if you believe one thing that's not necessarily true and you're not seeking the truth, it's going to cause.
And I would say my style of fitness was like to do more functional full body work anytime I was not running. And by full body work, I mean like
High intensity.
not always high intensity, but like you're doing quick lunges with weights in your hand. So you're working your upper body and your lower body, and you're doing moves that incorporate your whole body essentially. And I would describe it as functional moves. So moves that help you function better in life. They're not like using machines at the gym and things like that. So that was my style, and primarily because with my schedule and having some days where, maybe all I can fit in is a quick run. If I was able to do a full body workout, at least I felt like I was working my whole body and not, just neglecting certain areas. But through pregnancy, I've definitely shifted that, and pulling back on running has allowed me to prioritize strength in a different way. So I have been doing more dedicated days of like upper body, lower body, full body, deep core work, and then mobility. And I've really enjoyed it. I think having to slow down for a purpose has helped me enjoy it more versus in the past, like I said, I wanted to get in and out and be efficient, and with my time, not having a lot of time, and slow workouts just weren't intriguing to me. But now I see the benefit.
I think something pregnancy has caused in you is to, when you do slow down, you start asking like, what's the most effective? Not necessarily what's the most efficient. Like, what's the most effective routine that I can do with my time? And that's where I think lifting becomes effective in a lot of ways for preparing for pregnancy. And when I say lift, I'm very loose with that term. Like, you can interpret that however you want, but in my eyes, it's picking up a certain amount of weight for a certain amount of reps for a certain amount of sets with the intention of gaining strength, not the intention of raising your heart rate and sweating. And that's something I've noticed in you. The difference has been when you go into our garage gym here, the goal isn't to exert yourself to the point where you're feeling depleted. The goal is to exert energy to gain more strength, to actually feel better the next day and the next day and the next day, so that when you do give birth, you're feeling strong. And then once you're in postpartum, you're recovering more. If you're feeling depleted going into birth, that's just a bad ripple, and you're trying to create the positive ripple. And that's what I've seen, the training that you've done in the gym. It's very inspirational to me because you have been able to adapt, and not just adapt in the physical way, but in the mental aspect of, okay, I need to change how I was going about what I was doing. That's not easy to do. You haven't ran in how long? When's the last time you went for a run?
Probably 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago.
How has that been easy? Has that been something you've thought about?
It hasn't been as hard as I thought it would be. I think this has been an interesting experiment, because the reason I stopped running through the third trimester was not really because I was having pain or discomfort. I just really wanted to give myself a genuine break from it. I didn't want to put any mental or physical pressure on myself to maintain running just because it was something that I was doing. And sometimes mentally we're like, well, it's
just
something
because
I've
you
always
can
been.
Doesn't mean you should.
Right. And I was thinking about the pelvic floor and the importance of relaxing the pelvic floor as you get closer to birth. And running puts a lot of pressure on your body, or a lot of strain as well. And so I was just like, is this a necessary thing, or would walking maybe be more beneficial in a slow walk?
I think that's a great word.
And
is this a necessity?
Yeah.
And I also think, like, watching you, I think when it's something that you enjoy so much, when you do have, I would say, this like completely different body, like it
wasn't the same.
You've put on like 40 pounds, almost 30 to 40 pounds in your pregnancy. It's not the same. It's not going to be the same running as what you're used to. And when you're thinking about, is this a necessity and should I put myself through this stress? What could you be doing in replace of that actually is enjoyable? And that's where I'd love to ask you, like, has the flip
I also really didn't want any of my workouts associated with body image in pregnancy. And I think that's huge for women. I think you're going to see your body changing in ways that you never fathom, and it's completely out of your control. So no matter how intense you work out, your body is not really going to change. You're not going to see aesthetic results, and that should not be your goal. Your goal should not be to work out to decrease the amount of weight gain you have through pregnancy. So I almost just felt like running, if that was going to hinder the amount of fat or support that my body needed to grow, which is a weird feeling to think like, oh, maybe I shouldn't run because maybe my body needs this like homeostasis of weight gain that maybe running could inhibit, and maybe it's not the best for me. So that mindset was a new one, and one that I think is really important for women to have.
Well, let's flip it into nutrients. How has your eating changed? First trimester, second trimester, third trimester?
I would say first trimester, I was a little more all over the place with cravings, and I noticed a huge spike in my appetite. Second trimester, I think it leveled back out to what I was used to eating.
This is also how I knew you were pregnant. I forgot about this story.
Cashews.
No, was it cashews or almond? Yeah, it was a big bag of cashews.
Cashews.
So Erin comes home with this. Erin doesn't eat cashews.
This was actually before I knew I was pregnant.
Yeah, this is before we knew. But I put two and two together after.
I mean, I eat cashews, but not on the regular.
I've never seen you come home with a bag of cashews, let alone a jumbo bag of cashews. And so we were staying in this Airbnb for the summer because we sold our other house and we're waiting for this house to be built. And I come home and I open up the pantry and I'm just like, were these big ass cashews like here prior to us getting to this Airbnb, or did you buy these? And she was like, yeah, I bought them. But she ate maybe like a handful of them and then never touched them again. So when I look back, I'm just like, oh shit, like that was a craving.
The funny part of this story is that like I specifically went to the HEB to get these cashews. And I don't know why I picked the biggest bag that you could possibly pick, like the jumbo size, that even the cash register, the person at the cash register was like, do you want this? And I was like, yeah, like I do. And I took it home and I had a lot of them and I was like, whoa, that's a lot of cash.
I hope whoever stayed at the Airbnb after us got some use out of them.
Well, yeah. So that was an interesting indication. But so those kind of cravings were first trimester, and I'd say my appetite spiked a lot and I was like, this is new. But then second trimester, I think things leveled back out and I was eating more like I was pre-pregnancy. And then this third trimester, I'd say appetite has increased a little bit again, and I'm eating a lot throughout the day. I think it helps me to eat more frequently throughout the day, because there will be times when I feel a little nauseous. Like I actually feel that a little bit right now. So I already had a whole smoothie this morning that I would consider to be a pretty substantial nutrient dense meal. And it's only been like 2.5 hours and I'm already like, I need something. So that kind of frequency has been a little bit of a change.
Have you been focused on like your distribution of protein, fats, and carbs?
Definitely been focused on protein. And actually, I haven't been focused on carbs at all. I would say like that's not a concern for me, but protein intake, making sure that I'm having enough protein, and then not being scared of fats. Like that's something that, again, women, I think, sometimes think you can't have fats. And I've gone through a phase in life where I was like kind of scared of fats and felt like I couldn't digest them well. There was a time when I couldn't digest them well, but now, I can eat a bag of cashews. Just kidding. But no, I make sure I have
more like cashew butter. We've been putting cashew butter in a lot of different things.
Avocado, ghee butter. I put that on a lot of things. I eat meat that isn't, 99% lean. I have seeds. What else? Cook with olive oil. These are all things that like back in the day I just didn't do because I was like, oh, my body can't digest it. I think there's a little bit of fear.
But it's for your hormones. Hormonal health is fats are vital.
Yeah.
For hormonal health. And as your hormones are fluctuating throughout pregnancy, like that's where that comes in, where it's extremely important for you to have the distribution. And to clarify, you said you don't look at carbs at all, but that's because the way that we operate and we eat is just like, we by nature just are eating protein, carbs, and fats in almost every meal that we have because of what we purchase from the grocery store. So if you're listening to this, the way to have a healthy distribution is just to make sure the healthy distribution is in your closet and in your refrigerator. And if it is, and your meals have that healthy distribution, the byproduct is healthy hormones, healthy digestion, and feeling great. Period.
Right.
So it's really just what we've done is, since you've been pregnant, we've been ordering groceries a lot more than we used to. One, to save time, but also to just like get in a groove of what do we need. And it's been super helpful because we just stack up on the protein, we stack up on the seeds and the fats, that the avocado and all the other fats that we eat, and then the carbs, which I would say sweet potato, rice, and things like that. So it's really, I would say, structured is the word. Our eating is structured, and we kind of eat the same thing.
It's because we have the system down. Like, we know what are the staples that we get on a weekly basis, so we don't really have to put a lot of thought into it.
I will say you're eating more desserts than I've seen you eat before, which I love because I eat dessert every day. So seeing you enjoy baking and making desserts and allowing yourself that flexibility, to have that has been very enjoyable for me. So that's something I hope that you keep after pregnancy. So let's get to this last section here of like third trimester. This is where you've really started to not only notice a change physically, but having to start adapt mentally to slowing down and shifting gears on what life is going to look like, starting to read new books. We went to a doula session and learned about Baby 101 and how the doula is going to help us throughout the birthing process. So give us a rundown on the third trimester.
Yeah, third trimester is when I was really like, okay, it's getting closer, and now I need to learn all the things. So I took that a little bit more seriously. I just felt like in the second trimester, I'm like, I have time. I want to continue my life. I don't want to drastically change anything yet. But third trimester, I will say, I agree. I doubled down on really learning about all the things that we're going to be in for. We did hire a doula, which I'm really grateful for. And I think I'd highly recommend, even though we haven't gone through the birth yet, I can already feel the value of somebody to share information that is kind of all over the place online. And, you know, for us to be here kind of without family, I think it's helpful. And so I've done a lot of research. I've done a lot of preparations.
So where's your research? How do you go? What's your process?
A researcher, like what
Just anything.
Specifically?
Yeah, like how have you like learned it all? How did you find a doula? How did you find anything that had to do with getting the room together and all the stuff that I see you do on a daily basis? Where are you getting this information from?
Well, I haven't really thought about how I've done the research. I just do the research, but I have learned a lot from.
Okay, so Erin, I'm trying in the future, I'm working behind the scenes to help Erin package the knowledge that you have better. When you're thinking about how you do research, yes, you just do it, but there's certain people that you can shout out here. There's certain products that you can shout out here. There's certain services that you can shout out here. Everyone listening on the other end of this doesn't know how you went about doing that or what those actually are. So when you're thinking about this person on the other end of this mic here, like that's how you're going to break that down. So just as simple as that, like TikTok, Instagram, blogs, Pinterest, what did you learn from? Who did you learn from? What services or products did you learn to utilize and why?
I will say, someone's asked me recently if there's any books that I recommend, and I didn't find a huge amount of value from any books. I think there's bits and pieces of different books, and I can share that in a different forum because I don't have all the titles off the top of my head. But a lot of the information I did find was through the internet, blogs, looking for first-time mom, just general advice. I also got a lot of help from family, my sister who has a almost 2-year-old and is also pregnant, and my cousin who has 2 kids of her own, have been extremely helpful in sharing knowledge. But there's just so much that you don't even know to ask. So I didn't think about the doula until I was thinking about, okay, postpartum, we don't have family here, so I might need some help, and was doing research on Austin-based doula companies, and was initially going to have a postpartum doula. But then when I started exploring what a birth doula does and the resources and services that they provide, I decided that what I was actually looking for was someone that could assist us with the labor and delivery process and kind of.
Why were we more interested in that versus the post?
And I might revisit this one more post, but the services that a postpartum doula provides are typically like nighttime relief with your baby. So allowing you to get more sleep, cleaning up the house, doing some of the feedings and changes through the night. And that was just something that both of us thought, it's going to be really tough, but let's get through it. Like, we can do that. And you know what? Like, family's going to come and hopefully they can help us a little bit.
And we also value privacy. Like, we like to have our alone time, and we already knew family was coming into town after that. So if lacking a little bit of extra sleep was going to be the path, but give us a little bit more privacy just to be alone, that was the decision that we made. It might be different for other people though.
Yeah. And maybe, once the baby's here, we feel like we do need more help. But the birth doula services are more around making sure you feel confident and prepared for the birth experience that you hope to have, given not everything can always go as planned and there's a lot of uncontrollable circumstances, but they do help prepare you in ways that your doctor may not be able to. And so I've already experienced that, but also they're advocates for you during the birth experience. And both of us coming from experiences in the medical world where we felt that there were things outside of our control, maybe things we wish we knew before going in that we could have asked questions about or had more of a voice in. We just felt like having someone there that was very educated and experienced would be helpful.
I look at it as simply as like, if we're talking business and we're in entrepreneurship, you hire consultants to, like, when you don't know how to do something, you pay good money for a consultant to come in and teach you. And this day, giving birth is the most important thing in our lives. So spending money to have somebody there to basically consult for you and help you feel confident in that time frame is something that, even just having that 2-hour meeting with her and learning, was a breath of fresh air. And I highly recommend it. You said that books weren't something that you really looked into, but you are reading a book right now called Outlive.
Yeah, it's unrelated to pregnancy, but it's health focused. Dr. Peter Attia is someone that I really look up to as an influencer in the preventative health space. A lot of his research is around the science of longevity. So his focus is around really avoiding the major diseases and high risk factors for death by improving our lifespan and health span, as he calls it. So it's been nice to read about that in my downtime and kind of reaffirm some of the behaviors and habits that I've instilled and incorporated into my daily life and that I hope to continue to do. And yeah, I'd say I also listen to a lot of different podcasts. I've kept up the podcasts around
which
longevity,
podcast?
like Peter Attia's, Tim Ferriss, Dr. Andrew Huberman, so the Huberman Lab. But then also some of the birth podcasts. It's hard. I actually found that there's not a lot of podcasts around labor and delivery, but I found a couple from doulas and labor and delivery nurses and nurse practitioners that have been helpful. So again, I can link them.
Is there what social accounts have been helpful?
A variety of social accounts. I think I follow some of the new mom fitness accounts just for inspiration. Even though I feel pretty motivated, there are times when it's nice to just see someone else going through it and keeping it up. So I've started following a lot of other moms kind of in a similar stage of their journey as me who have continued fitness routines. There's been a lot of helpful resources on Instagram around baby's sleep, breastfeeding, and just general new mom knowledge in general. So I think Instagram and TikTok have been good sources that didn't exist 30 years ago. So I'm fortunate that we live in a time where you can get a lot of information. It can be overwhelming, and there's times where I'm just like, I cannot consume another baby fact right now. But there's lots out there.
All right, last two questions. We're going in towards week 40. He's going to be coming out soon. What do your workouts look like this week? And then what are you looking forward to most post giving birth?
Workouts this week, I'm going to keep up what I can, but definitely incorporate a lot more slow stretching. There is something called the Miles circuit, which is a series of poses that helps baby descend into the pelvis and get in position for optimal labor and delivery. So I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to be doing some of the like yoga type movements to really slow down, focus on my breathing, focus on mindset, and really just get in the game, because this is a physical feat. I'm training for it like I would any other athletic endeavor, and a lot of that is mental. So for me, it's going to just be a lot of mindset, nervous system, balancing, and just relaxing as much as possible, which is tough, but a lot of downtime. And then what am I most excited for? I'm excited to not be pregnant anymore, and I'm excited to really just have a new part of us to grow with. And
Don't be selfish with this answer. Like personally.
Personally, I'm really excited to get back to some routines that I've had to stop. Like I want to go into the sauna and get back into the cold plunge and do things that make me feel rejuvenated that I haven't really been able to do. I'm excited to get back into running eventually. Pushing the stroller and adapting in ways like that. And yeah, I think there's so much excitement ahead, but those are some of the things that I can't wait to do. Have some
awesome.
sushi.
And part of your workout routine this week is you got a massage coming up here tonight.
Yeah,
so going to put you in that relaxed state and continue to work on your mobility and stretching and breathing. And then on the other end of this podcast, and the next time you're on here, we will have more information on what it's like to be a new mom. So thank you for joining me here today. If you listen to this podcast and it was impactful or helpful to you at all, and you think there's somebody else out there that could utilize this knowledge, please share it with them. Give us that 5-star rating and review. And until next time, I will talk to you later. This is CJ Finley with the Thrive on Life podcast. Thrive on, y'all.